Melanie likes my vibes.
I do like your vibes.
Funk you up. Hey, this is only one person from our class. This is so sad. I think Maddie should get extra credit.
Yeah, Maddie should
definitely get extra credit. So
I know the professor.
so do I.
She's the director. She's a director, producer, casting, scripting.
Good morning. How are you? Welcome to Comm Week, day 2, last day. I am going to forget to announce this at the end, so I'm just going to tell you all right now. There's free pizza at 12:30 in the ballroom for Comm Week. So if you can, slip in and get some free lunch. That session's going to be all about networking and resumes and all that good stuff. So if you have any of those things, bring them. But if you don't have them already, it's totally fine for you to come and listen in on the tips that our professionals are giving and eat free pizza. So 12:30 in the ballroom. I'm really, really happy to introduce a fine group of students who are going to talk with you today about a really important topic, and that is fighting misinformation, all the bad information, lies. We could call it fake news, but I don't even like the fake news term because it's become so politicized. But what we're really talking about is lies and bad information. So we have with us today Lindsay, Melanie, Allison, and Megan. All work for the Sunflower, the student newspaper at Wichita State, and all are also in my Principles of Journalism class, which the whole class is supposed to be here, and we have one single other representative. So that's all I have. So welcome, thank you all for presenting, and take it away.
Well, hello. I guess we'll start doing more with, wow, I can't speak. We'll start with just some introductions individually. So like Amy said, I'm Lindsay Smith. I'm a senior here at Wichita State studying journalism and minoring in creative writing. I have been at the Sunflower for all 4 years. I was editor-in-chief for about 2, news editor for a little bit, and now I'm newsletter editor. I've interned at the Wichita Eagle, and right now I'm at KMUW as an intern. So.
Hi, I'm Melanie. I'm a junior. I've been at the Sunflower for about a year now, and I intern at KMUW for their Spanish broadcast.
My name is Allison. I'm a communications major, creative writing minor. I'm a sophomore. I've been writing for the Sunflower about a year now, and I'm interning for a marketing company.
My name is Megan. I'm minoring in communications, and I have only been at the Sunflower for a couple of weeks, but when I was at Hutchinson Community College, I was at their newspaper for all 2 years.
So we are starting with a little video because we all love videos, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, you ready?
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time.
That might look like President Obama addressing the nation, but it's not. It's actually actor and comedian Jordan Peele impersonating the former president, mixed with old video of Obama that was manipulated to match Peele's words. This is an example of what's known as a deepfake. It's a growing trend that's sweeping the internet. The technology can be used for some harmless fun, such as editing actor Nicolas Cage into movies he's never even starred in.
In my world, it means hope.
Well, here it's an S.
Yes, this is actually a thing. The technology can even be used to make people with no rhythm look like they can dance. But deepfake technology also has a dark side. Both private citizens and celebrities have seen their faces put without their permission onto existing pornographic videos, posing a new challenge for privacy issues. Appearing to say or do something one never did can also have political ramifications.
President Trump is a total and complete dip. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele.
It's easy to imagine how this can begin to cause problems. Now, the US government has taken notice, and they've given CNN an inside look at a program they're sponsoring to get ahead of deepfakes.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying.
Just keep it like that. Put it in presentation mode. Perfect. So this is deepfake. I don't know about you guys, but that's kind of scary to me personally, because you might just be scrolling through like your social media and literally everything will seem pretty normal unless you really pay attention to like his micro expression. So just keep in mind that like we are already so technologically advanced that we can do this, but we're still going to get even more technologically advanced. So we have to be able to spot all those like fake news and like not fake news, but like misinformation, disinformation.
All right, so we've got an MIT study, and believe it or not, lies spread 6 times faster than real news. It's just kind of how we're built. When we see something maybe particularly surprising or upsetting, even if it's not true, we tend to remember that and we relay that information. So because lies can be predictable, but they can also be totally outlandish, and those are the things that spread really fast, especially faster than truth, because lies are usually more interesting. We have this lovely quote by Winston Churchill: "A lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on." Pretty dang accurate. With the spread of information nowadays, with all our technological resources, you can post something on Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and it can be anywhere in the blink of an eye. So what's important to know, especially when you're searching for misinformation or disinformation, is to know the difference between the two. So misinformation is false information spread unintentionally, while disinformation is spread intentionally. Now, of course, you get different vibes, like, one has a little bit more malicious intent than the other, but they're both really dangerous, especially if they're not corrected.
Okay. So, ways to combat, we're going to go deeper into all the ways, but right now, just broadly, ways to combat misinformation, disinformation is obviously fact-checking, debunking. And that you also have to be careful with that, because sometimes if, you are fact-checking something, it can even go further. The lie can get even further. People can still read it and still decide to believe one side of the story. So I think it's important to know what is worth, fact checking and pushing out there versus something that might not be getting as much, attention. That may not, it might get even more attention when you start to talk about it. So I believe, like, while fact checking is important, it's even more important. Media literacy is even more important. And for those who don't really know that term, that's just kind of being able to understand media and be able to effectively read it and effectively just be able to know when something's fake or not, being able to tell the difference between an opinion article and a news article, being able to tell, what is a good news source, what isn't a good news source. And that way it's just, you won't spread misinformation because you already know the tools. So this is kind of something to talk about. So this is a graph, and obviously you can all kind of read that, but it just kind of shows, if someone does really good at, understanding media, they can, the more people who know how to fact check, the more people who know how to effectively read articles will be able to stop that in its tracks, versus having to, you see the end, versus having all that be right and then you have to, as journalists, have to, stop it in its tracks. That is a lot harder. So our job should be fact checking, but also I think media literacy should be the main focus, just so everyone already has those tools embedded in them. And next.
So one of the reasons, or some of the reasons, misinformation and disinformation is so hard to combat, it has really nothing to do with intelligence. Your IQ has nothing to do with how susceptible you are to falling for misinformation. We as humans are hardwired to believe what we want to believe, regardless of the facts, and we just often seek info that validates and vindicates our beliefs. And once we form conclusions, they're hard to change, even if we're presented with facts or evidence that directly contradict those conclusions. Changing our minds would be accepting what we believe is a lie. So one of the things we can do to help combat misinformation and disinformation is checking the source, checking where the story came from, who wrote it, and what are some potential biases could really help see if the story is accurate, if it's trusting. PolitiFact.com is a really neat little tool to help just see if information is truthful or not. There's this Instagram post that was going around that Hurricane Ian was orchestrated as part of a pandemic-related conspiracy to devastate Floridians. And as you can see, PolitiFact just went through and they kind of go into detail about how they determined that this was false. Where's my little slideshow? Is this mine still? Okay. Another thing you can check is that if there is no byline, it's probably fake. If there is a byline, but it has questionable content like a lot of ads or just sketchy content, you can search the byline to see if it's actually a journalist.
All right. So something that, like we saw with deepfake, that is becoming really common is manipulating photos. And there's two ways that you can you can basically do this. One is through directly like messing with the photo, photoshopping something in, photoshopping something out. Even how closely you crop a photo. Say you have a really good photo of someone yelling at someone else, but you crop that photo out. You miss context of the story and you don't understand fully what you're looking at. So it's a really, really easy way to mislead readers, and you have to be really careful, especially when you're publishing your own work, that your photos are telling the truth, because you have to look at it from the audience's perspective if they're going to see it the same way you see it. So here's an example for you sports fans. This was right after the 2020 Chiefs Super Bowl win. Donald Trump made a tweet on Twitter, and it said something along the lines, I'll paraphrase a bit. He said, "Really proud that the Chiefs represent the great state of Kansas." Now, anyone who's a Chiefs fan knows that they're based in Missouri and not in Kansas. So a lot of internet trolls, internet comedians, quickly whipped together this image, and it looks pretty legitimate. He has shadows, he has creases on the shirt. Honestly, like you would look at this and you would think it's a legitimate photo that was taken of our dear friend Patty Mahomes. Well, if you do some reverse image searching, you can actually see he's wearing a Showtime shirt, and that image was totally fabricated. It was photoshopped on there. It was spread Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, everything. And it took some really committed journalists to go back and to correct this mistake. And it's actually on PolitiFact as well. You can see their falseness meter where they correct that. But I mean, you would have absolutely no clue that it's been photoshopped. So something that's really useful is if you go into the file attributes, you can see if it's been edited, you can see the date that it was made, you can see who made it. You can kind of just check those things and from a logical perspective decide if it's legitimate or not. Another way is you can reverse image search, and there's a variety of tools that you can use for that. But Google's also, it has like a reverse image search option. So the majority of visual disinformation that people are exposed to involves much simpler forms of deception. So one common technique involves recycling old photos and videos to apply them to current situations. So, with Hurricane Ian, you always see photos of the sharks swimming on the highways and stuff. Well, those photos that you're seeing now, it's likely that a lot of them are back maybe they could be photoshopped, first of all, but it's also likely it could be from a hurricane 10 years back. You have no idea because a lot of publications like to recycle photos if they feel it applies. So here's an example with Turning Point USA. They posted this on their Facebook. It's a ransacked grocery store, and they were like, yep, socialism sucks. There's no food, nothing to eat. But this photo was taken in Japan. It was not even taken in the United States. It's also taken in 2011, which was a few years before they posted the caption, the photo. And of course they made it a meme, and they even put their watermark in the bottom, to make it look legitimate. But it's an unrelated photo. It's an old photo. It's a photo they didn't take. And it's misleading. So it is mostly dangerous because our brains are more receptive to images than to words. We see a picture, especially if we see something kind of shocking or surprising, we're more prone to remembering that because it's easier for us to process pictures than words. So when you share photos, especially if they're fake, you have to be aware of all the eyes that are looking at that, all of the perceptions that are going to be made. People are going to look at that and circulate that information without even checking it. So it's often your job as a journalist to check it first and make sure you're sharing legitimate information. Couple tools you can use. This is an example of the Google reverse image search. You can see right up there, that little bubble. You can click on that, and basically what it'll do is it'll identify the people in the photo, and it'll also find similar pictures that look about the same. So, if you search up that first image of Patrick Mahomes in the Great State of Kansas t-shirt, you'll go and you'll find all the legitimate pictures that he actually posted. It was on a trip to Disneyland or something like that. So that's one really, really easy, effortless way. That takes 2 minutes. Please just do it. Another two really great resources you can use is TinEye and photo forensics. Those will go farther back, kind of date the photo. They'll tell you, okay, this is when it was initially published. This was when like a copy was posted and the changes that were made, and this is who posted it. So you can verify the sources. You can also, it's a great way to determine if sources are legitimate or not, because if you see them posting fake information, manipulated photos, you get a pretty good idea of what their morals are. Okay.
Yeah, so kind of talking about what Allison was saying about how sometimes photos are posted later on. That can be the same for stories. That can be the same for quotes. Same for anything. One. Let me, oh yeah. Okay. So something that can happen is people could either just share an article from 4 years ago and it literally says on the date that it was 4 years ago and they think it's today. That's pretty easy to combat. You literally just click on the article, look when it was published. But sometimes that can get even more scary with social media. Sometimes people can just take what they want to take from this old article and just post it without the date like it's new. And something that just happened recently was with Hurricane Ian. I don't know if y'all saw on Twitter, there was a clip going around of Shepard Smith from Fox News basically saying all this crazy stuff about the hurricane, how everyone was going to die. It was crazy. And legitimately, Smith left Fox News back in 2019. So left way before, 3 years before the hurricane. And the clip is actually from 2016. And Pointer is a really good resource. They have a lot of fact checking stuff, but they also, if you're interested in journalism, they have a lot of journalism related articles. But they fact checked it and it exactly explained, where it was from. It was from Hurricane Matthew, not Hurricane Ian, back in 2016. So that's an example of that. Oh yeah. And then bad headlines, that's also a sign of misinformation. If a headline shows up and it basically leads you to believe one thing and then you click on the article, it leads you to believe another thing. It's obviously really sad. I think as journalists, you should always have legit headlines that match the whole story. But sometimes people, just don't read it and end up posting a headline that they don't mean to post. And so it's important to read the whole article before jumping to conclusions. Here's an example. Don't remember where this was from, but the headline says if you snore, you could be 3 times more likely to die of coronavirus. So obviously there are a lot of people who snore, but turns out the article actually says that if you've been diagnosed with a loud snoring condition, then you could be 3 times more likely. So it's a specific condition that you have to have in order to be more likely to die of COVID. But of course, they just said, oh, if you snore, you might die of COVID, which is completely ridiculous because you know how many people snore? So many people snore. But also it's important to note that really reputable news sources can also do this. Maybe not on purpose, maybe on purpose, it doesn't really matter. But, there's some examples from like the New York Times, even from the Wichita Eagle that I've seen. And then, they usually try to go back and fix it because obviously we all make mistakes. But even if it's from a reputable news source, if it has this claim, it is important to read the whole article before you either share it or jump to conclusions. It's just really important too. So, yeah.
All right. So be patient. Of course, when you're covering breaking news, there's always a rush, a fumble. You want to be the first one that gets the information out there. You want to break the story. You always need to be accurate first because it can have really, really bad consequences if you put information out there that is untrue, which of course we know this, but as you'll see in the example, this one was actually particularly tragic. So it was after the 2012 Sandy Hook shooting, and basically the shooting had happened. This man was still on the run. No one really knew much of the details. The police weren't telling people much of anything. News sources were just being thrown information. So a lot of people took what they thought was the truth and they ran with it. Fox News posted the wrong photos. They looked the guy up on Facebook, found someone with the same name, and published all of those photos. And so this poor guy was coming back from work and he was on Facebook. He's like, it wasn't me. I didn't shoot up the school. All of this, totally ruined his life, and he was associated with that for a long time. The Business Insider, they proposed that there was a second shooter, which there was not. And of course, that impacts parents, family members. They all thought, okay, my kids are still in danger. All the while they don't know if their children are alive, if they're dead, how many casualties there were. So all of this false information, it not only, decredits journalism and, it exaggerates that we want that speed over accuracy, which we never want. But, it also has a lot of really serious repercussions on the family members who are learning things from media outlets and they don't know if their kids are okay. And they check the news, and if there's false information, if there's a second shooter, if it's the wrong person, and then they see this guy walking down the street later on, that can have serious consequences, and overall contributes to distrust in the media, which we want to avoid, of course.
So when you're looking at news, you want to check who owns the website. Many of the times, you don't know who owns this, you don't know what their agenda is. So always be careful and on the lookout for that. And like anybody can make a news site and just put stuff on it, and people will be like, oh yeah, it's a news like source. So I believe in whatever they're saying. So like credible sources most of the time will have like an about page, and like it'll like name their mission statement and what they're working for and kind of like their goal with like their page. And so kind of be open to your own biases. Like I know like the Washington Post, they are owned by Jeff Bezos. So if they write a story about Jeff Bezos, they will say in the article like we are owned by Jeff Bezos. So just check that. So yeah. Oh yeah. Try to check the New York Times. So the New York Times has been a really credible source for a long time. So most of the time, if they publish something, chances are you're probably going to believe it because they've been around for so long. They've been covering so many events and stuff. But you don't really know what these people cover. They obviously cover like political stuff, but you don't really know what they're talking about or like. And then be on the lookout for keywords in headlines like Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives. Be on the lookout for that because that will pretty much kind of point you to kind of what you're reading and like what their goal is.
I think this is
Mine?
still you. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And we're really prepared.
We're really prepared, guys. So there are some tools out there, kind of like to search this information, like ViewDNS. They kind of search for information about who owns the websites, IP addresses, IP history, and more. So if you need to look for anything, you can just look it up there. And then the Wayback Machine, they can pretty much pull up anything that has been published throughout the course of anything. I guess the history of anything. So you can like type in like the IP address, and it'll give you like all this information about like the news source, and like they'll keep an archive list. Thank you.
Yeah, so this one's a little more obvious. Obviously, people make grammar mistakes. The biggest news sources will make grammar mistakes ever so often. But if there is a headline, if there's a story that is just riddled with grammar mistakes, every other sentence or something wrong, it's just really bad. And if you can see that could oftentimes mean A, it might not just be a news source at all, or B, if an editor didn't use their time to go and fix those grammar mistakes, how do you know that they went and made sure all the key facts in that story are true? And so I think it's important to pay attention to that. If it's riddled in grammar mistakes, always, and if there's something big in the article, always go and search up and see if that was covered by another news source, see, where else you can find the information. And that's a little more obvious to kind of see, because if there's a headline that says the wrong there, you're probably going to notice that. Hopefully. But so that's just a little fact. So a few more tools. This is called CrowdTangle. You can add it to Chrome. And basically you can see where a link has been shared and where it came from. So that's kind of nice to see kind of the traffic, who's kind of viewing this link, who's sharing it, seeing if it's being shared by incredible news sources or it's all just, people you don't really know. Twitonomy, you can just see the analytics and insights of any person's Twitter account. And so if if there is, I think it's important for reporting too, if there's someone running for an office you don't know about, you can look up their Twitter account, see if they've, been sharing fake news, well, not fake news, sharing lies, liking tweets with conspiracy theories, things like that. So that's kind of important to see if someone is sharing fake lies. You can go and see kind of if that's a trend or if this is just, they might just not be informed. So that's really important. Facebook ad library, you can see the ads running on Facebook in a certain area. That's kind of fun. But that's actually all of the slides we have. So does anyone have any questions? We have a lot of time. We went through that fast. So any questions, comments? Yes.
So earlier you said something about looking at the byline to see if it's like a credible author. So if you look at that, how do you know if that's still a credible author or not?
Yeah, so I think that really, you can really just Google that person. And on Twitter, sometimes if you have the news source name, you can really just Google like Lindsay Smith, and then the newspaper name or whatever. That's usually the easiest way. And if you can't find that person easily, that's probably a red flag. And I would say that goes more for like news sources that you don't know. Like obviously if something from the Wichita Eagle or the New York Times ran, and there's nothing like that you notice that's inherently wrong, you should always double check. But you don't really have to check the byline of every New York Times article. That's more for news sources that you've never heard of before. And so usually you can look them up on Twitter, you can look them up on online. That's usually pretty easy to find. And if you can't find them, you could always email the news source and ask them questions too. So
yeah, because any good journalist wants their work to be out there. They want to see their name attached to their word baby. So if they're trying to hide it, then you have to consider, okay, there might be bad intentions here. There might be a certain reason why they're not including their name, or if they fabricated a name because they don't want to take the heat for it.
So danger of self-reporting. Like my prime example would be Reddit when the Boston bombing happened. They had a little witch hunt for a guy that was not him, and he ended up committing suicide as a result. So what's your guys' stance? What's your guys' opinion and take on that versus citing actual facts and sources?
I think that's just not journalism. I think the problem is journalism is such a competitive field, and it's turned very competitive where you want to be the first to publish anything. And it's important to not do that. But also, if you can't stop people from, like you said, Reddit, or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, I think if something like that happens where that information is out there, I think it's a journalist's job to check that information. And if that's not true, I think it is the responsibility of journalists to say, hi, everyone, this person has been connected to this bombing. That's not true because it was actually this person. And in that case, it could save a life. But yeah, self-reporting is definitely I don't want to say downfall because it can be nice, if people are being responsible, but it is kind of a downfall when it's so much easier to just, you hear, because how many rumors you guys hear all the time that are just not true, but would be crazy if they were true. And people could just go on social media and say, oh my gosh, did you guys hear this about this person? And it's definitely one of the dangers. Mm-hmm. Do y'all want to move over here so you have the mics if you talk? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was saying, just to add on to that, it's always really important that you understand when you're writing, say, like a really sensitive piece like that, where, people were killed, people were injured, families are impacted. You have to take into account, okay, if everything I publish has to be true because, it's going to seriously impact other people. So, of course, always be careful, but be a little extra careful, Run it by your editor, run it by a coworker, do some good research beforehand. It's okay if you're a little bit late because, in the end, if the decision you make is going to stop someone from committing harm to themselves or to others, it's really worth it. But, yeah.
Okay, so you guys all work for the Sunflower, right?
Yes.
You just went through all these things that you can do. How often do you guys actually do them?
That's a great question.
But I'd say all the time.
I would say I primarily cover, it depends on what we're writing, of course. So like for the moment I'm working on a feature piece, which doesn't really require a lot of background check. Usually you just use first person sources. If I ask someone, where they're born, where they came from, the odds that they're going to lie to me about that are pretty slim. And, I can always Google them and double check if they say something super outlandish. But I was going to say for the political pieces, and Lindsay might be a better idea for that. Of course, you always want to do your history and back check. I'd say we're pretty consistent with it. And at least if we're not, if we cut a corner, always make that correction. At least I will say that something the Sunflower is very good with is that when we do make a mistake, we want a correction right away.
Yeah. So I think it really depends on the piece, but definitely if there's ever a piece that is more serious or a lot more facts, it's always important to double check everything. I think one of the ones that our news editor worked on over the summer was about the August 2nd vote. And just kind of, obviously there was a lot of, misinformation going around about, what the vote meant, what it means to vote no, what it means to vote yes. And they were really good at, reading the amendment and double checking everything, going to the experts about it. And so I think anything with a lot of background, you have to check that, but, you can never check too much. So I think definitely as journalists, you will use a lot of those resources all the time in your day-to-day job, and of course there are some stories that don't require it. If you're going to just cover a chili cookout, you don't have to check to make sure, are beans really in chili? There are some things that you don't have to look, but definitely you will use those a lot.
Yeah.
For stories that you cover about eating disorders, anxiety, depression, and say you interview somebody who has those and is diagnosed with it, what are some precautionary actions you guys take when it comes to asking questions that could trigger something or could upset?
That's a good question. I can take this one if you don't mind. So I just covered the Purple Mile March, which covers domestic violence. It's advocation. It gives victims and their families a chance to kind of heal and share their messages to the public. So, of course, with that, I had to go. I was walking with people in the march. A really great way I started that, I was like, hey, do you mind if I walk and chat with you, or would you like to use this as a moment of silence? You always want to respect, because, for a lot of them, they're mourning, or they're processing, or they're using that as a moment of solace, a moment of remembrance for the people they've lost. So you always want to give them, you don't want to box anyone into an interview, because you will find someone that is willing. So like, hey, do you mind if I, ask you some questions, or would you like this moment alone? There was a woman in particular I was speaking to who had lost a really close friend in a house fire with like suspicious circumstances where they believed domestic violence was involved. And I go, okay, do you feel comfortable telling me a little bit more about that? Usually people will be pretty receptive. They'll tell you. If it's something that hurts a little too much, they might hide some details, and don't push them for that. It's their story, it's their voice. If they don't want to share that, then there's someone else who will be willing. You just have to ask around a little more. I don't know if anyone else has any. Melanie, I would say you covered the plane crash.
Yeah, so I recently covered the Wichita State football plane crash with the team, more than half of the team in the planes. So I would say definitely if you're covering like an event, kind of like what Allison was saying, kind of, let them know like, hey, kind of like what brings you here. Try to open up like a simple conversation. Don't just go with like, the hardcore stuff, just kind of ease it in. Just like what brings you here, how are you feeling? How's everything? Just like simple conversation back and forth. If they, like Allison said, if they are willing to talk to you and they bring something up that you will definitely be interested in about, definitely ask about that, because now they're opening up to you about like grieving or losing a member or stuff like that. So
they can use that as like an avenue of healing too. I mean, the woman I spoke to, she felt good knowing that her friend's voice was actually her friend's name and her friend's image was actually going to be shared with other people who would maybe, take some kind of action in her favor.
And I think it's important to not go in with, I want to say agenda, but I can't really think of the right term, but don't go in saying, oh, I want to talk to this one person who's experienced this, because that's not okay, because then it's almost like you're making the story the way you want it. But when it's a sensitive topic, I think, like what they said, to just say, would you be willing to share your story? And not necessarily, would you be willing to share this, that I want to go talk to someone with this? Like, that's not the right place to do that. So definitely just be conversational and just give them an opportunity to just talk, and don't push it. I think that's the most important thing. So.
And you're allowed to say, like, if they tell you something, you can say, I'm really sorry for your loss, because that's not,
you should always do that.
You need to be a kind ear to listen. Of course, you're not going to like warp your perspective or their perspective or anything, but you can acknowledge if something terrible happened. You go, I'm really sorry that happened to you, because, it's true. It's terrible.
And I think always like double checking, is it okay if I publish this, is important. I recently covered the 5K Suspenders for Hope Marathon, which was a suicide awareness memorial like walk and marathon. And I mean, it's heavy. That's heavy. And there was a whole family reunion basically from the entire Midwest who came to Wichita for their 14-year-old, cousin, grandson, nephew. And I tried to talk to the grandpa, and he told me, Caleb was my grandson, and he broke down. And I'm like, okay, thank you for your time. I'm so sorry. And I let that go because, I felt that, and I wasn't going to push him, but that was heavy.
Mm-hmm. What I was going to ask next is, whenever you're talking, they break down and they start crying or getting visibly upset, a way to backtrack from that, so that way not to pressure it anymore. What are some suggestions for that? Like how you said, I'm not going to push it any further. I'm so sorry.
Sometimes those emotions slip out, and I'm the mom friend. I always carry some tissues with me. So, if you need to console them just a little, like, are you okay to keep going? You're allowed to ask that, and they'll probably appreciate it. They'll be like, okay, someone who's actually looking out for my welfare and my emotions. Sometimes people just need a minute. I take a good cry every now and then, and I feel fantastic afterwards. So sometimes they just need like a minute or two to let it out, and you can stand there. Sometimes I'll take some notes, but of course you want to make sure that they're still willing to participate. But if they aren't, if they just need a minute, then just be patient with them. Don't try to rush them. Of course, all of those nice, friendly tips.
Yeah, I would say you definitely don't have to, leave, right away when someone breaks down. It's important to give them space. And if they do, ask you to leave, then, but, yeah, it's important. So any other questions about anything? Yes. No, you were perfect.
So, like, whenever it comes to kids, like son in like grade school or stuff like that, like the Texas shooting, that girl surviving the only survivor from class, and like if you get a chance to talk to that kid and you just kind of don't know how to understand what's the best way to kind of deal with that situation.
Like you don't understand like what they're saying.
Basically, like whenever you don't know how to word it without, either hurting the kid further or, bringing up a memory they would rather forget.
It's of course, it's important you want to ask. I mean, even if it's a kid, they have an idea of bodily anatomy and they have an idea of what personal space is. So, you go, hey, I want to talk about something kind of upsetting that happened to you. Are you okay with that? And then what you kind of want to do, you kind of want to meet at their level, because sometimes as journalists, we get the rep that we're kind of like all knowing, and we're there to interrogate and get shit done. But in that case, you kind of want to put yourself on their level, just be like, I know it was a really upsetting day for you. Of course, don't include that in your story. Don't say, so-and-so said it was an upsetting day. Just say, I understand, some terrible things happened. Can you tell me what that was like for you? Just asking for their perception. If they can give you a whole story rundown, then you don't have to ask those prying questions that could, trigger some sort of emotional response or some past trauma.
And it's also, if you don't quite understand it, you don't want to, word it in a way that's not, the same. You can always say, so would it be accurate to say this? But obviously, like, don't say that without them saying anything. If they tell you something and you're not really sure what that means, then you can always say, so are you saying this? And then double check that. It's always important to double check when you're not sure, because you don't want to, like you said, you don't want to publish something that's going to further hurt them or is completely inaccurate because you misunderstood it. It is 100%. I think in every interview, no matter the situation, you should always, if you're ever unsure, you should always double check with the person.
And then when it comes to like traumatic events like this, I would definitely say keep it conversational. You're not like the police interrogating them for answers. Yeah. Keep it conversational.
And the parents would also probably be good to reach out to as well. Anything that the kid can't put into words, the parents can probably express on their behalf. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, you want to credit them, and say so-and-so's parent and whatnot.
Question.
So how would you handle like a hostile or like uncooperative interviewee?
That is an amazing question. I've had many of them. So exactly, like, in what way? Are they just being completely rude, or if they just don't want you to use their quotes? Exactly. Is there a specific situation you're referring to?
A little bit of both.
Man, that's a good one. I think so. It definitely depends on the person. It depends on, if it's, an elected official, if it's someone that, has a position of authority, you can report that. If it's something of really importance, I think it's important to say in your story, this person declined to answer this question, or this person, refused to do this or whatever. I think it's important to report that. If it's someone, if it's something a little lighthearted, like you just go to an event and try to interview someone and they're just super rude to you, and if it's not worth it, then it would just be like, okay, then I'll just, walk away, find someone else, because you can always find someone else to talk to. But if it's someone who has agreed prior to an interview, if it's someone that, is a position of authority, it's important to report that, and just stick to what stick to your guns. If they won't answer your question, then keep asking, and then if they still won't answer it, say, why won't you answer this question? And if they don't want to, if afterwards they say, hey, I actually don't want you to use my quotes, well, they can't do that. That's, if they've already agreed to on the record, if you've already agreed that prior ahead of time, then they can't do anything about that. So you say, sorry, I'm using it if it's important. So.
Mm-hmm. And like I use an app, Otter, on my phone that records interviews and transcribes them. So it's really great, if you ever have like I didn't say that, because some people will actually pull that card on you, believe it or not. You can actually have that accurate record.
It's important to record. And we live in a one-party consent state, meaning, like, of course you should always, let people know that you're recording. But, if I'm having a conversation with Melanie and I'm recording the conversation, she doesn't have to know. It's not illegal for me to record that. Of course it is, proper to just say, hey, my phone's right here. I'm recording this conversation and you can even explain it, say, just so I can make sure I get accurate quotes, because, everyone likes, for us to report them accurately. So it's for their benefit. And if they're uncomfortable with that, I know we've had some people say, well, can you send me the recording afterwards? Don't share your notes, but you could always say, well, you can always record it too. We can both record it, so you have that as well, because, they have every right to do that as well. So.
And if you're in an interview and someone like won't budge, like they're giving you like a rehearsed statement or like a public statement over and over. Kind of try and dig into that a little bit. See if they wrote it themselves, there might be some things that they missed. If it was something that was made by like their PR person or their lawyer, it might be a little more difficult. But if they keep spitting the same thing back at you, you can say, okay, why are you giving me the same information over and over? Or you can pick apart their statement.
Ask further questions.
Yeah, and I would say, of course, stick to your notes. Don't let them intimidate you. We always, something that I do often is I check my notes, and don't be ashamed of that because sometimes you need to keep track. And don't let them spin that to you being unprofessional or wasting their time or anything like that. Because you're a credible journalist and you're trying to get their statement, and if they're going to be difficult, then you do what you have to do, but stick to your guns because you are in charge of the situation. You ask them to the interview. You're conducting it. Don't let them take back over. It's going to give them that power play, that manipulation over you. That's going to allow them to get away with saying less. So just stick to your guns and know, you conducted the interview. It's your business.
I do believe there is some leeway, though. Obviously, if you go in an interview saying strictly, like, I'm going to control this, I'm only going to ask these questions. Of course, if they say further things or if they want to talk about something else on top of that, it's important. But like Allison said, if they're just straight up just saying, I'm only going to answer these questions, then report that.
What was the name of that app you said that transcribed the audio to?
Oh, Otter. OTTER.
It's OTTER dot. AI or IA?
I think it's IO.
AI.
Really checking.
It's fantastic.
Otter. Okay, so AI. So Otter.ai.
Okay.
It's nice.
Yeah, you can get it for a subscription, but it's free. You get like 30 minutes of transcribed recording. It's fantastic. I live and die by it.
And it is important to double check because they will they'll transcribe it for you. But it's also important to double check and listen to it ahead of time. I remember one time our president, his name is Rick Muma, and one time he said, "Hello, I'm Rick Muma" or something like that, and my phone transcribed it as "Hello, I'm Brittany," and I was like, "That's not right." So it's important to double check too. But what I love about the app is you can search, like if there's a keyword that you remember, you could literally search it and it could show you the part of the reporting where it's at. Mm-hmm. Like Allison said, I will live and die by it. So, and yeah, I feel like someone else had their hand up back there, but is that a yes?
Same exact question.
Incredible.
Wonderful.
Anything else? Anything about misinformation? How to handle conspiracy theories?
How to call people out with correct information when you see them posting incorrect information. As journalists, it's kind of your obligation to do that.
Would you like to tell us about it? You're working.
I mean, if you're inviting, of course, like.
Allison, do you want to come up to the mic? So
Yeah. So, you might have like a crazy Aunt Deborah or something on Facebook. Who's posting something totally, absolutely like borderline conspiracy theory. I was gonna say, as a journalist, it's kind of your obligation, but it's also, it's kind of like a duty to, maybe just in the link say, okay, here's an accurate source that actually tells that story correctly with, that's with, like backing up interviews with like secondary sources, official documents. You don't have to do it rudely. Just point out like, hey, there's some things in this article that were wrong. Here's where you can find the right information. Because media literacy, of course, would be fantastic if we all learned it when we were young. But, we have to teach the older generation too. And even like younger people now, because we still don't have media literacy classes. But just to give them those resources and maybe, it'll keep them a little more conscious, a little more aware of, hey, going in the future, maybe I should actually read the article or fact check a little bit. Could you kind of use the element of shame a little bit, like, of course you don't want to make people feel ashamed, but if you're like, hey, that information's like totally untrue and here's where I found it, then they might actually start to think a little bit more, which is what we want. We want that critical thinking, especially when it comes to media. Just away from the podium now.
And I think it's also important to not give it too much attention. It's important, like Allison said, I believe it's our duty as journalists to, fact check things and to, call out misinformation. But if it's going to do more harm than good to bring attention to this, to something that's just completely not true, then the best you can do is just give them resources to be able to, learn, how to spot misinformation. But sometimes it is best to not give it too much attention and just like Allison said, just be nice about it. Even if it's the same Aunt Deborah posting all the conspiracy theories every day. So yeah. Any other questions? I told you to ask a question. You didn't ask one.
Yeah, Maddie.
I don't know what to ask.
It's good. We were thorough. We were concise.
The journalism thing. Ask them if there's anything else they want to talk about.
we'll fall for it every time.
You don't want to ask
Ready.
that? Is there anything else we would like to talk about, ladies and gentlemen? Yes? No? Yes.
In journalism, I kind of try to stick to the spectrum side of like photos and stuff.
Mhm.
It's an odd question, but like the emotions in a photo,
Mhm.
what do you think of like say you're trying to capture photos for like the plane crash or the hurricane, just tragic events or just any kind of event like the parade with suicide awareness. What do you think are the best things to look for in those kind of photos when you want to like reach out to someone?
Yeah. Definitely people. It's always important to have people in the photos, like and to have a specific focal point. Obviously, like, if it's like, like a march, it is pretty cool to get like, everyone marching. But I think the best photos are the ones that are up close to people, to their faces, to their emotions. I think the kind of emotions you want to get really depend on the event, depend on, what exactly you're reporting on. But I think there was a really good photo. Who took the photos for the plane crash? Was that Mia? Mia. There's a really good photo our news editor took. And it was someone that was, because the plane crash happened like 52 years ago. So it was like the reunion. And there was someone who was kind of tied. Huh? Oh. Oh, that is an amazing. That's our advisor, everyone.
Show ourselves up a little bit.
Forgot we had a laptop in front of us.
No, it's the same.
Look, those are my pictures. Are we going to read the story?
Oh, you could have just pulled up like the issue.
Yeah, but then you don't see up close.
What if you just like Googled me?
Yes,
I'm just gonna look
search.
at Mia's.
Yeah.
See, well, that's a really good one. There's no caption. What? There's one specific one. Where's that one that was on the front page? That's Melanie.
Oh my gosh, bye.
So like photos like that, obviously that shows emotion. It shows someone that was connected to it. It really, kind of we are drawn to human emotion, but also it's important to cover events that as they were. And it's important to show that human emotion too. It's our job as well. So it's not just to get, the clicks, obviously, but it's in order to get the human emotion in there.
Mm-hmm. And then when you're taking photos, like don't go in with an agenda. Like when I did the purple mouth photos, I got like some tears and that. But something I didn't expect, some representatives from like the missing and murdered Indigenous women were there. And, they were walking really solemnly, really powerfully, I will say. Like they were in silence, they were dead face straight on, really like a powerful message. And I was like, okay, well, I have to get a photo of that. So yeah, don't go in thinking like, oh, it's a sad event, I need to get people crying. Because, some people don't cry at events like that in public. And, you can get varied reactions. But yes, always aim for that human emotion.
So the middle one was the one I was thinking about, but the one on the left is good too. And even the hand holding, that doesn't have people in it, but it has emotion, because we know, people hold hands when they're sad, people hold hands when they're happy. But in this case, it was for comfort. So yeah.
And then don't be scared to go up to people and take their photos, especially if it's like a public event. If they don't want you to take photos of them, they'll let you know that they don't want their photo taken. So just.
Yeah. And if it's at a public event, like, you don't, you have every right to take photos and document it. It's not illegal in any way, especially it's a public campus too. It's everything, Wichita State, you can take a picture of literally anyone and they can't really do anything about it. Of course you want to work with people, if it's a case where it's emotional, if someone really doesn't want that taken, then you can work with them. But if it's, something more lighthearted, people just, hanging out or whatever, they can't necessarily be like, you can't take a picture of me, because you can. But, in your case, when it's about emotional events, it's important to take their emotions into account and to make sure people feel safe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you deal with just like getting motivation to just get out there and like do stories and write something?
Oh, that's a good question. Something that I started doing just lately, because I mostly do interviews, I write stories, I don't take very many pictures. But if I go to anything, I carry a camera with me, because people seem to like think it makes you like really important and really official. Like even if I don't take any pictures, like if I walk up to someone and ask for an interview and I have a camera around my neck, they're like, I mean, of course, people don't usually deny interviews, but I feel like they're far more likely to see you as a professional. and to actually, take part in those interviews. Just kind of like a tiny little trick I learned. It makes you look way more important.
And you feel more.
Yeah. You're like, I'm work, I'm getting a story, I'm doing business. Like you feel kind of in your zone, which kind of helps with that motivation too. And then carry your notepad everywhere too. It kind of makes you feel more official, makes you feel like you've got your stuff in order. Makes you feel more motivated to, when you have that blank page in front of you, it feels more motivated to fill that up.
And I think the longer you're a journalist, the more you get that motivation. There was a quote in a book that we read for class, and I don't exactly remember who said it or what it was, but it was talking about how journalism, I'm going to forget it. Like journalism isn't a job. It's do you remember it?
I don't remember the exact quote, but it's more like a lifestyle. It's like
not a lifestyle, like a
passion. I mean, a
no, like a role. Like you have to it's a duty, kind of. Another word for duty, I don't remember it. But because it's I don't remember. It was a really good quote. You all should look it up. But basically, it was basically saying, everyone knows journalism it's the only profession that is protected in the Constitution. And I think that in and of itself is kind of crazy that we are literally protected by the Constitution. And I think it is more than just a job. It's a duty. It is to the American people. It's to the people wherever you live. It's to make sure that people are being held accountable. It's to share their stories. We have information. While you're working on a story, something that no one else does, that it's important for everyone else to know. And I think keeping that in mind, that you are literally fulfilling a duty to those in your community, like that, it's hard to lose motivation. It's easy to feel pressure, but it's hard to lose motivation when you know that it's literally a duty. Like we are, helping the people around us, know what it is to, there's another quote. Dang it. I'm full of quotes today, but I can't.
You're giving a voice to the voiceless.
You're giving a voice to the voiceless. You are protecting the democracy by being a journalist. It's a really important job. It's a role. It's something that we need in order to function as a society. So it's really hard to lose motivation when you kind of have that in mind. And the longer you do it, the more you realize, hey, this is really important, and we can't lose journalists. So, which is also important to fact check, because if misinformation is going crazy everywhere, then people will lose trust in the media, and then boom, people won't think our role is a joke. So, kind of segueing it back to our topic today. So yeah, any more questions?
How do you call out misinformation in person?
Oh, that's a good question.
Something that's really nice, if someone tells you just a bit of info, say what's your source?
Yeah, because they won't know.
Yeah. If they're relaying and they can't tell you the source, then you're like, okay, and I'm supposed to believe you because...
It's important to ask, like she said, but also to ask, can you pull up that article? Mm-hmm. Can you pull that up? And then if they do pull it up, then you could say, well, here's why that's false, whatever. But if they can't pull it up, then you can just... I feel like most people will realize then and there, oh, maybe this is wrong if I can't find it anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Or if they just say something as vague as oh, well, I saw it on Facebook. My friend posted it. Mm-hmm. That's a red flag right there.
And if it's something big that's very newsworthy, there's no way you can't, if it's true, there's no way you can't Google it and see other news sources covering it. Mm-hmm. There's no way. Something Megan said this morning, someone said something about how Donald Trump was back on Twitter.
Yesterday, I woke up with a Twitter notification, and Donald Trump had posted on Twitter. But then, I think it was an old tweet that had just been recirculated.
Yeah, because then I literally, all I had to do was Google Donald Trump Twitter and nothing. And so I was like, okay, well, let's figure this out. So, just ask them to pull up the source. And then, of course, be nice. You don't want to be it's so easy to just be mean, because sometimes you get so upset when it's this is so ridiculous and I keep having to do this. But it's important to just be nice and just say, can you show me that information? Because I saw somewhere else that this happened and this is from this source.
Were you the one with the cousin who thought cancer wasn't real or something?
Yeah, that's another story for another day.
I would say definitely be patient with people, because they don't understand media or news or like you do. So definitely be patient with them.
And you could partially blame them, but you can't put all the blame on them. Mm-hmm. When there's so many news sources dedicated to producing, misinformation and disinformation, just try to put educated standpoint. Hey, you're a little bit lost, but that's okay. Let me show you how to get back on track.
Mm-hmm. And usually, most of the time, while they might not get it from a trusted news source, they might get it from a trusted family member that they trust. And, if it's someone that they've grown up with a long time, they're not gonna, it's easy to trust them.
Or someone in power that they trust. Like if
politicians.
If a politician or a congressman is saying all these things and they're like, there's no reason not to trust them. Because
politicians
because in their mind there isn't.
Yeah. I think someone started asking a question. Was that you? No? I heard someone start talking. Maybe it was one of us. Any more questions?
In regards to doing an interview and interacting with an individual or a group that you might not want for the sake of just decency and portraying a positive light, how would you give an unbiased standard interview with that without either incidentally portraying them too negatively or too positively, trying to be biased? The example group I can think of would be like the Westboro Baptist Church.
Oh, right, yeah. That's a good question, because obviously, you don't want to give people a platform for no reason. You don't want to just go and write a feature story on the Westboro Baptist Church for obvious reasons. I think it really depends on the story. Like let's say the story is that the church sued against this other place for this stupid reason or whatever. I think it's always important to back, like, obviously, you need, quotes from people who you're not going to want to go get quotes from. And I think it's always, to get quotes, but also if they say something completely ridiculous, it's not biased to say in the article, well, this is false because of this reason. You don't want to give...
not corroborate.
Yeah, because like if they say something that says, well, legally I can do this, but they really can't, you don't want to just put that on their article and not fact check it because you don't want to be biased. That's not biased to say, well, this is false because of this reason. And you can call them out for that. I think it's important to not give people platforms that they're just going to use to spread misinformation, and as journalists, you don't want to post an article about this person who's all just saying misinformation and you don't call them out because you don't want to be biased. It's not biased to report the facts. And with a group who, is all about misinformation, and if you need to get their quote, just back it up and just say, well, this is false and here's why. And so that's not biased at all to do that. But that's the hardest part of the job, is having to be like nice and professional with people, because we all have our biases, and obviously with a group like that, no one's going to want to go and talk to them and be nice to them. So I think it's just important to use your voice and your role as a journalist to call them out for things that are not true, because you don't want to give them a platform for no reason. You don't want to just go write a feature story on these hateful people for no reason. So it's only when you absolutely have to, and of course, always call them out for if they say something factually wrong, which they probably will if you're talking to a group like that. So, yeah.
So I've had to avoid stories like this, and I've tried to go at them before because I've experienced some experiences that were not the best nor the most pleasant. Whenever you're talking to people about religion, like when it comes to that topic, I know it's sometimes a very sensitive, emotional. It can induce a lot of problems, get a lot of attention and rage, and anger a lot of people. Like I personally am a separate religion from what I was raised to be, supposedly. Whenever you're talking to two different religions, and say it's not one that you believe in, and the standpoint would, I don't know how to put this question. Like if you're talking to another religion on their opinion on a religion that isn't theirs, like say Christianity to Satanism.
Okay.
If you're asking a Christian what their opinion on Satanism is, and if you ask the Satanist what their opinion on Christianity is, would you call out false? Would you actually do your research on both? Would doing research on both sides of the religions first be a smarter choice than just kind of guesstimating? Maybe Satanists are bloodthirsty people, or Christians really are as bad as they seem.
Yeah.
Would you want to do religion research before going to do that?
Yeah, I would say for sure. I think I'm trying to think of a story that you would need to talk, and that's what I'm kind of struggling.
like if
I'm
one
just
sued
asking
the
as,
other.
like, an informational
Yeah.
source. I know there's a lot of like misleading things about like Satanists. or
Yeah,
pagans,
for sure. You should
or,
always,
like, Muslims.
yeah, you should always
There's a lot
double
of
check.
misleading information for us, so,
Yeah.
like, just not even for a real reason, just for information.
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah, you should always research anything. I think in any story, especially a story like that, you'd want to get obviously like two sources. You want to get more than one source. So in your case, it would be a Christian and a Satanist, and then you should also get a study or some information with further research as well. And so I think it's always important to have more information. It's always important to have more information than too little information. And you don't want to run a quote or a fact that's wrong because you didn't do that research. So I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing more research. In fact, you should always do more research. So the answer, in my opinion, would be yes. Yes. Anyone else?
Yeah, and I think doing it before
would be even better.
Would be helpful because, like, I know nothing about both of them. So if you go in knowing nothing, you're gonna, yeah.
Or you're gonna like have assumptions that aren't true. You know what I'm saying? Because it's with any religion, it's hard to talk to. It's hard for everyone to be on the same page about any religion, even if they're on that religion. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, I think like what Megan said, I think it's important to do research ahead of time because then you'll know what questions to ask too.
Mm-hmm. And then kind of to your first point, when you're doing interviews between like touchy topics, like interviewing the Christian church about Satanism or Satanist church about Christianity, you want to avoid using hot words.
Mm-hmm.
To my knowledge, like Satanists don't do like blood sacrifices. So if you go, to the Christian church and you're like, oh, well, how do you feel about the blood sacrifices? Not only is that not true, but that's a word that's kind of gonna fire them up. Like of course nobody really wants to hear that there's sacrifices going on. So you're kind of giving them, you're infuriating them. Some people make them angry. It'll make them upset. And then you're already basing that off of information that isn't true. It's easier in like politics, if you say like, well, how do you feel about Democrats, Republicans? Like using the word hysterical in connection to women is one that I've noticed really predominantly. So if you ask like a woman, like, why are you so hysterical? I mean, like those are loaded words. They can have negative implications, and then they can kind of confuse the person you're interviewing. It can make them angry, it can make them upset. Kind of takes away from the interview that you actually want.
Use lighter words that won't infuriate them.
Yeah, it doesn't have to, like, it can be like synonyms. Just don't use those, like the words that you see in headlines that are clickbait, trying to draw you in and make you angry and make you upset. Avoid that kind of language, that polarized language, because it's going to do more harm than good.
Okay, so if there are more questions, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. But if you have any more questions and want to talk to us, I think we'll just hang out here until 10:45, I think. So if you have any questions, please let us know. But thank you all so much for coming. It was a lot of fun. You had a lot of good questions. I hope you have a great rest of your day.